Samantha Redline. I'm the director of Kennel Eviction Rescue, and the reason we're here today is because in July of 2024, 116 dogs were removed from Dianne Bedford's property. 98 of those dogs are dead directly because of the poor care they were in under Dianne Bedford, under Woofy Acres. And right now, the San Bernardino County DA is trying to take this case from originally 38 charges, 7 being felonies, to 1 misdemeanor, which completely disregards the lack of empathy towards these animals, the lack of regard for how shitty of quality they were in, how starved they look, the embedded collars, just the overall scale of neglect. If you look at her record, she's known for being somewhat of a hard ass, for a lack of better words, but she has completely tried to downplay and disregard. And even some of the quotes you see on the t-shirts that we're wearing, the way she disregards people's concerns, the way she disregards the condition the animals were in is just really unacceptable. Even this one right here, the issue of animal hoarding is not the hoarder. How is that the answer in any way, shape, or form? If we perpetuate that in our legislation, this is a case that can be used to allow other hoarders off, and this should be setting a precedent, and this should be a martyr for what is not okay in rescue, what rescues cannot get away with, and if anything, we should be held to a higher standard. The charges should be stricter. There was 116 dogs and 1 died in transport. How is that not a felony in its own? Compassion fatigue is real, but she could have stopped at 10, stopped at 20, she could have stopped at 30, 40. We saw her pulling dogs as late as January of 2024 when she had legally abandoned 32 dogs in boarding in November of 2023. And when you deep dive on Dianne's history, she spent over a decade working with trauma response victims, where herself was the person that was supposed to evaluate victims. She also evaluated for Medicare claims and things of that sort. And she was trusted with all of this human care. That why is it that we are overlooking all of the animal care she neglected? She obviously had the medical background, the experience, the education to understand what was happening to these animals. Just like kennel neurosis. If Dozer wasn't really starved and he had degraded from kennel neurosis, which is what we do see in some animals, it doesn't make what happened okay. There are ways to go about things. Dogs can be sent to train and board, or the most humane option sometimes is euthanasia. But there needs to be better options before we get there, or we shouldn't have to get there. Dianne pulled these dogs off the youth list with a promise of sanctuary. She marketed Woofy Acres as a sanctuary and rescue, all breed, large breed, etc. And instead, these dogs were packed up in sheds, in kennels, and just completely disregarded. How are we expecting a woman who's over in her 50s to be walking and taking care of these large breeds and giving them any genetic fulfillment, reducing stress in any other way other than sedating them? And even when you talk to her fosters and things of that sort, they claim that they were given trazodone a lot for these dogs. Wow. How is that the blanket solution in any retrospect? They would have been better being euthanized than ending up on her property suffering for over 2 years. And it's not like it started with Pinion Hills. It started with Chatsworth, where she started piling up dogs in her property, and then she foreclosed that property and she just opened up another one where it was even poorer conditions. There's a huge history. And even with the 32 abandoned dogs, she tried to buy the dogs back. She offered $30,000 to reclaim ownership of the animal she abandoned, because in California, 14 days of no payment or no contact on an animal in someone else's care is automatic legal abandonment, which she did. And instead of responding to the dozen of messages asking her what is the plan with these dogs, she waited until there was a public outreach for their abandonment to try and repair the situation, which also wasn't okay in any respect. And it's a very good thing these dogs weren't returned to her.
My name is Jill Deshay, and I'm Executive Director of Out of the Cage Rescue, and I'm here today protesting Dianne Bedford's hellhole in Pinion Hills and encouraging everybody to write San Bernardino and make it known that the 7 felony counts should stick, because dogs like Rover never got a home, never made it out of the terrible conditions they were kept in, and he was ultimately euthanized at divorce shelter for being too far gone. So we're hoping that doesn't happen to any other dogs. Please rescue with a plan. And please call out rescues who've been irresponsible in pulling without a plan. Rover was a dog at East Valley Shelter. He was an older boy, but he was super friendly, and he was a volunteer favorite. And we started to network him, and we got some nibbles from people who were interested in him. And before we could actually formalize a rescue plan, Dianne Bedford pulled him from East Valley and he was never heard from again. I had called and tried to help her network him because he had disappeared, and I knew that he'd be a great dog for somebody. I offered to help her video him so we could start to promote him, and she said no. Never talked to her again, and we never heard from Rover again. So we know he was one of the 114 dogs that was killed at Divorce Shelter. We don't know all of the dogs that were killed, but even one is too many. The fact that she's been charged with 7 felonies and many misdemeanors, the felonies need to stick, and she needs to never have a dog again.
My name is Catherine. I'm an RVT, and that's how I met Chester. He's a special needs dog, and it was him and Rudy that I met at my job. And when they got adopted, the woman who was adopting them, she was pretending to be a rescue, specializing in special needs dogs. And so she took in 63 plus dogs, was telling different rescues that she can do rehabilitation, surgery, so she was pocketing the money and just neglecting them. She wasn't providing any kind of care. He has seizures and she wasn't giving medication. Just completely neglected them in Arizona. When they raided the home, they believed the garage was like over 100 degrees. And so unfortunately, 5 of them had to be euthanized because of her neglect. They gave her 1.5 years and 7 years probation for fraud. I feel like justice was not given. There was a law that was passed for better regulations so that in cases like Chester, if the concerned citizens reach out to the police or anyone, now they can go and assist sooner versus what happened to them. It took about 3 weeks to get assistance. There's not a lot of follow through, whether it's with police, the animal control, they don't want to step over toes. So it's just overall, we need to educate our law enforcement, our residents, and let them know what laws, or even just participating in legislation like attending city meetings. I think starting there versus just education. The core problem is just people are just unaware that cruelties like this still exist. 2026, not knowing what is required and what is enforced from the legislation. People think it's okay, but I think just education and stricter laws, because she's banned from life from having pets, but after her probation, how is that going to be enforced? It's very concerning that this could possibly happen to other dogs, with her being out, with Dianne being out as well. I do not feel safe as a pet owner, or just for the dogs that get adopted out.
My name is Danielle, and I am a volunteer with Kennel Eviction Rescue. And I got involved with Kennel Eviction Rescue when Dianne Bedford abandoned 36 dogs at a boarding facility in Rolling Heights. That's how Samantha and I met. Samantha and I should not know each other. We should not be friends. We should not know each other. There's no reason why we should have ever crossed paths, but we did because of Dianne Bedford. And in wanting to, take care of the dogs that were in the animal shelter that I knew and that I loved, and that some of them I networked. And I'm going to be brutally honest, there are 9 of them that I helped forget. That is why I feel incredibly dedicated to seeking justice for those dogs, for all 116 of them. We want to put pressure on the district attorney to fully prosecute this case. At her last hearing on January 6th, I was there as an observer when the new DA came onto the scene, and I was sitting in the courtroom. She approached me. I had never seen her before. I actually thought that she was an attorney for Dianne Bedford, because I hadn't seen her before. She wasn't the old DA. And she approached me and said, "Are you Danny?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Yes." So we went to a side room, and she told me that she was going to give her a plea deal, and she was going to not seek felony charges because Dianne doesn't have prior convictions. And it was like a gut punch, to hear the DA say that, that it's a mental health issue, and that I can't even put it into words the way it felt. I mean, I put my hands in my head in my hands. She basically made everyone responsible except for Dianne. And what she said to me, that this is an issue because the animal shelters kept giving her dogs. This is an issue because people don't spay neuter. This is an issue because the laws say that every dog that has to be euthanized has to be get an opportunity to get to be rescued. And so that for me was the moment where it was like, oh my gosh, like we have to get serious because it's not going to be so slam dunk. You would think it would be with this amount of cruelty, but so that's why we're here. We're mobilizing to put the pressure on. What she did was criminal. It was intentional. It was conniving, in a sense. She knew what she was doing. The only person there who would have known who I was, who would have known who I am, is Dianne. And so she had to have been the one. I can't put my finger on it, honestly. This is my first time speaking about it publicly. If I say anything, what's it gonna do? Is it gonna help her case if I go and blab this to everybody or what? But by now she's already responded to emails saying essentially what I told you, so it's like, okay, so now I don't, I still don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. Honestly, it felt like she wanted me to be on Dianne's side. We all want the same thing, don't we? She doesn't know me from Adam. I don't know what she expected to happen, but I called Samantha and I was like, oh my God. And it was just like, okay, we got to get serious. I know we're busy. Both of us were like, okay, we know we're busy or whatever, but we got to prioritize this because we know people care. It basically just inspired me to fight more because I want justice for these dogs, and people who have the power to enforce justice for them seem to be failing them. And so it's, just letting them know, this is what we want. I don't really know, what would make someone look at this case with so much evidence. The dogs were there. They were right there. 97 of them killed. I can't explain it. I don't know why someone would not want to. If you are someone who says you want justice, you think laws should be stronger. Okay, well, there's laws right now. Let's make enforcing the laws right now matter, as opposed to just, we need laws to be stronger. Duh, we all know that. We need the laws to be stronger. But when they exist for the animals that need them, let's make it happen, And so I don't really know what her, why. I know there were past cases that she did prosecute. One of them, I don't know if it was because there was so much public pressure with that case or not, but the way that those people described, the courtroom atmosphere was one of this person, this DA really wants to get her and is sticking to it and making sure it happens. So I can't understand why, these dogs can't get the same, same consideration. I mean, those dogs, it was only 5 dogs, but I don't say that to say it was only 5 dogs, but those dogs, I saw a couple pictures. Those dogs were in really poor state. The couple of survivors, they were extremely skeletal. And so, so that was that. But it's like, well, what did some of these dogs, there's some of the dogs who we don't have pictures of. So we don't know what those dogs look like. There are the ones that we do see that we're like, oh my gosh, there's Dozer who we did see. How is Dozer not a felony count? Logan, he's a misdemeanor. He was one of the worst case dogs. Sandy, the dog who I actually picked up from DeVore. Stand Up for Pits was paying for her medical and stuff like that for rescue. And she was one of the worst case dogs, just like Dozer. She's not even considered in the criminal counts. It's I don't know how they decided that, which ones mattered the most and which ones didn't matter the most, why they aren't, why does she not have 116 counts? Whether or not some of them are also misdemeanors, it just doesn't make sense. So the fact that there's 116 dogs, can we at least make the 37 counts matter? And not just throw those away too, because you've already, whatever that math is, you've already thrown away, 75 dogs. They don't matter enough to be considered in the criminal counts. So let's make the 37 matter. And so yeah, I can't put my finger on it, but these dogs are special, and I knew a number of them. Yeah, it hits differently because I knew them. One of them I networked. He was abandoned, one of my shelter babies, one of the lucky ones. I call those ones the lucky ones. And it's crazy to be able to say that about 36 dogs that were abandoned at a boarding facility. Those are the lucky ones. Because they got someone to take care of them, they survived. These ones, they didn't. And, I mentioned the 9 dogs. She's got history, even before I knew of her. She has history of doing the wrong thing people calling her out, all that kind of stuff, before I even heard her name. It's, you know, after the fact, hearing like, oh yeah, I called her out 4 years ago and people came after me and da 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 da, you know, other people saying that. So it took about 6 months to realize like something's wrong here. You know, so we knew a long time ago. We couldn't get her to like, you know, stop taking dogs, even though she wasn't like providing updates on them. They were fine as soon as they left the shelter parking lot. And things were very different back then, where like, you know, dogs that were behavioral, a lot of times were truly behavioral. So, you know, we knew that. They're great dogs, but we knew they had needs. And, you know, she wasn't providing that for them. And, you know, ghosting when you ask for updates and stuff like that. So it didn't take long, but those 9 dogs were dogs that another rescue had taken, and they were part of another hoarding case in Riverside. The Winchester hoarding case, John Talon, Life Matters Sanctuary. So they were confiscated. But we already knew about Life Matters. We were like trying to find out about those dogs, and then he finally got busted. And so we were trying to figure out which dogs we knew, and once we figured out which dogs we knew, another volunteer had asked Dianne to, you know, she was mostly in contact, she was the one who contacted Dianne. So it was like, oh my God, please save our dogs, you know, and which she did. And so, but I did a lot to help with figuring out which dogs they were, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. So I feel responsible. And, you know, for her, you know, for putting some of these dogs in her hands. And some of those 9 dogs were like Bella. Bella is one of them. Blue Butts is another one. Carter is another one. 3 of those dogs were euthanized from this case. And when you look at the pictures of how they were when they were taken from John Talon, who was a piece of shit and, you know, hoarder or whatever, but like when you look at their condition when they left him, it's not so bad. Actually, you know, he was feeding them tubs of spaghetti in a pool, but, you know, like he was feeding them. So when you look at the conditions, you know, and then you look at the condition they were in with her, she didn't save them, but she fronted like she was, you know, and she even made posts about it. Oh my gosh, like this is horrible how someone can do this to animals and dogs and hoarding. We got to find out who gave him these dogs and blah, 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 blah. But then turn around and do the exact same thing. But worse. It seems crazy to say they were better off with him than with her. She's going to be allowed to have her own personal dogs. Because imagine how it would feel for you if you weren't allowed to have your own dogs. That would like make someone crazy. I don't care. She doesn't get to have her own dogs. We also think that some of the dogs that she has are dogs that were confiscated from divorce because we can't find them. We don't know if these people gave these dogs back to her. Is the wrong just mental health? No, the wrong is also criminal. You know, it's like it's deliberate. You have to deliberately, you know, go and realize that I don't have enough food, or I don't have enough space, or, you know, this shed is too hot, or whatever. But I'm gonna go get more. As a rescuer, you can't do that. You can't say that you care and like willfully bring in more dogs to be filled. And, you know, and that's what she did. She was still raising money. She was raising money when she didn't even have, when she was delinquent with the Department of Justice for a minute. And she was still raising money. She disappeared for a while, and then she came back. And she came back with the force. So it was like, oh, you need money again, you know, because you and your Romeo Bricks partner are working together and, you know, just high pledge dogs, high pledge dogs, high pledge dogs, you know, and, you know, and making sure that those pledge PMs go out and that you collect that money and on them. If you have the mental acuity to do that, then you have the mental awareness to realize that something is wrong with you. So Dozer, oh my God, you're so skinny. Oh my gosh, Leslie, you can barely get up. A clear message needs to be sent to her about her, to the, you know, having people send messages to the Department of Justice. That's part of this as well. The main thing is the court cases coming up. We're here to spread awareness, but we also like need, you know, it's harder. It's a Tuesday on February 17th, but, you know, we really need people to show up. That can't be the end. You know, nothing will come of it. The reason why I'm so adamant about, like, the shady rescue and, you know, the T's being crossed and the I's being dotted is because of stuff like this. You know, it's like people get mad over, you know, what Dianne Bedford did, but you're accepting the same thing from other rescues. You're ignoring the same red flags. There's a lot of like new, you know, rescues coming on and stuff like that, and so they may not know or notice, and that, you know, like, this is we've seen this before. You know, these were the things that we were trying to call out before. I will be on Instagram. What's up with so and so, and da 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 da. Well, should you da 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 da. You know, that kind of stuff. And you know, some people get mad, but it's like the ones who don't get mad are the ones who are being responsible.